I'll continue with the chapter Organic Chemistry, some basic principles and techniques. This is chapter 12. Okay, today is the sixth day of myself trying to teach you this chapter without knowing how much you have benefited and how much you have not benefited. Okay, there is a dark secret over there. Okay, now till the previous class, I was trying to explain you regarding the isomerism, chirality, about chirality, left hand, right hand, which cannot be superimposed. Then chiral objects, left bottle, right bottle, they are similar. Okay, they can be superimposed. Okay, so something which cannot be superimposed in this organic chemistry, isomerism, are supposed to be they are supposed to be optically active compounds. Now, looking going further to some more examples of alkenes showing geometrical isomerism. Geometrical isomerism, which I mentioned in the previous class also, it is shown by compounds where there is a double bond, carbon carbon double bond. If you look at this example, trans, it is called trans because the chlorine atoms are on opposite sides of the double bond. So it is called a trans 1,2 dichloroethene. It is an ene, alkene. Whereas on the other side, you can see over here, the chlorine atoms are on the same side of the double bond, so it becomes cis. Cis means same. Okay, 1,2 dichloroethene. The second example over here. After that, we have cis 2 butene. There are four carbon atoms. The second carbon atom is having a double bond, so that is cis 2 butene because the methyl groups are on the same side of the double bond. After that, there is trans 2 butene because the methyl groups are on the opposite sides, opposite ends of the double bond. So these are some examples of alkenes showing geometrical isomerism. Okay, you may have some idea from this cyclic compound also. You know, the methyl groups in the case of cyclic compounds above the ring, the methyl groups are there, so that is cis. And in the trans form, one methyl group above the plane of the ring and one below the plane of the ring, so that also makes it a trans, trans compound, trans isomer. Okay, so this is just to give you some idea about the isomerism, geometrical isomerism, where one of the necessity is the presence of a double bond between the two atoms into consideration. After that, moving to the next slide, let us discuss about the necessary and sufficient condition for geometrical isomerism to occur or happen. Now, geometrical isomerism will not be possible if one of the unsaturated carbon atoms, see, unsaturated carbon atom is bonded to two identical groups. That means this A and B must be different. It cannot be A and A. That's why here you can see where A is not equal to B and C is not equal to D, because C and D are linked to one carbon unsaturated, A and B are linked to the other carbon which is unsaturated. So one important condition is the carbon which is unsaturated must have two different atoms, linked to each other. Okay, now after that, no two stereoisomers are possible for this compound. CH3HC double bond CH2, CH3 twice C double bond CH2, and Cl2C double bond CHCl. So these are three examples for which stereoisomers are not possible, which means if you draw the structures of these three compounds, you will find that each of the unsaturated carbon atoms, they are having similar groups. For example, over here there are two hydrogen, over here there are two chlorines, over here there are two methyl groups. So being same groups or atoms, the stereoisomerism is not possible in that case. Now, compounds existing in two stereoisomeric forms are given below. Some more examples like cinnamic acid, C6H5 C double bond C H COH. The C6H5 and COH group are on the same side of the double bond, so it is a cis isomer. Cis cinnamic acid. Please remember this cinnamic acid. For the time being, get used to the structural formula and the word. It is cinnamic acid. In the trans form, you will see cinnamic acid. The benzyl group, the phenyl group, and the carboxylic acid group are on the opposite sides of the multiple bond. So that was one example. Then look at the next example. Cis pen 2 in CH3 CH2 C double bond CH CH3. That becomes cis pen 2 in. Okay, and it is cis pen 2 in because the alkyl groups are on the same side of the double bond, whereas the other one, the alkyl groups are on the opposite side. One is up, one is down of the double bond, so it becomes trans pen 2 in. So I'm all talking about geometrical isomerism just now. Okay, after that, coming down to the cause of geometric isomerism or geometrical isomerism, the cause is hindered rotation because of a multiple bond. Carbon atoms involved in double bond formation and all the atoms attached to these doubly bonded carbon atoms must lie in the same plane. They must lie in the same plane. The carbon atom must be lying in the same plane. Okay, over here you can see these are the orbitals over here. Rotation is possible. So this, if it is a single bond, rotation is possible, but if it is a multiple bond, then that multiple bond hinders the movement of the orbitals. So that's why we can say carbon atoms involved in double bond formation and all the atoms attached to these doubly bonded carbon atoms must lie in the same plane because pi bond can be formed only by parallel overlap. Pi bond can be formed only by overlap like this. This is parallel overlap. But if it is head-on overlap is like this. Head-on overlap is like this, result in the formation of sigma bond. But this is going to form a pi bond. Okay. Now, parallel overlap of the two p orbitals. There will be decrease in the overlap of p orbitals if an attempt is made to destroy this copolarity. If you try to twist the molecule. In other words, we can say neither of the doubly bonded carbon atom can be rotated about the double bond without destroying the pi orbital. So if you destroy the pi orbital, then geometrical isomerism will cease to exist. So it is very important for geometrical isomerism to occur. A multiple bond is necessity. Okay. After that, moving to the next slide, properties of geometrical isomerism. Isomers. The chemical properties of geometrical isomers tend to be similar, but the physical properties are different. So, note it, chemical properties they are similar, but physical properties are quite different. So, cis 1,2-dichloroethane, boiling point, look at the boiling point being compared. Okay, physical property. It is 60.3 degrees Celsius, but the same, the trans isomer of 1,2-dichloroethane, if you see, the boiling point is how much? It is lowered. It is 47.5 degrees Celsius. See, the two chlorine atoms on the opposite sides of the double bond. So that's why it is lowering, because there is no hindering. Okay, there is no linking between them. So that is lowering the boiling point of this isomer. Okay, so that is going to affect the physical properties, but the chemical properties are likely to be similar. Okay, now moving next to optical isomerism. I give you 2 minutes. Read these three sentences carefully. All of you, those who are present in the classroom. Hello, boys. Have you read it? Hello, boys.
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
Okay. Now,
Yes, sir.
So,
if you look at the sentence of optical isomerism, then optical isomers differ in the way they rotate the plane polarized light. If the light is rotated in clockwise direction, this is clockwise, okay, then it is a dextro isomer, dextro. If it is rotated in the anti-clockwise direction, it is levo, Laevo, levo isomer. Okay. Now this I will clarify in my incoming slides. Now, enantiomers, isomers that are non-superimposable mirror images of each other are called enantiomers, which we have seen in the previous classes. We have seen this in the previous classes, which are non-superimposable mirror images of each other. For example, have if you have a look at some example over here, this one over here, plus lactic acid and minus lactic acid. If I lift this compound and try to put on this compound, it will be non-superimposable because this methyl will come over here and this hydrogen will come on top of this. So it makes it non-superimposable. So this non-superimposability makes this compound optically active. Okay. Now, after this, if you come further, if you look at the next slides over here, the diastereomers, stereoisomers that are not enantiomers, isomers with more than one chiral carbon atom that are non-enantiomers but differ only in configuration about chiral carbon. That means it is possible that isomers which are not enantiomers, that means they are superimposable, but they are having more than one chiral carbon, which are not enantiomers but differ only in configuration about carbon atoms. So it is possible that they may or may not exhibit optical activity, which I'll explain you from the upcoming slides. Now, let us have a look at the next slide over here. Now, to understand and clear the concept of optical isomerism, it is important for us to remember elements of symmetry. Elements of symmetry. If there is a molecule, have a look at this molecule on the book over here, on the slide, on your screen. There is CH3H, COH, CH, C, CH3H, okay, CH, COH. Now you compare this and this, they are similar. You compare this and this, they are similar. Now, this molecule, this organic compound, a molecule has a point of symmetry. It has a center of symmetry. Okay. Now, for a compound to be optically active, it should not have center of symmetry and it should not have plane of symmetry. Plane of symmetry. Plane of symmetry. So, if an organic compound has center of symmetry and has plane of symmetry, then that compound will not be optically active. So, that is one point to be kept in mind to understand the elements of symmetry. For example, if you look at the example which I am going to draw on the screen, have a look very carefully. There is a compound, organic compound like this, an imaginary organic compound, B over here, A over here, D over here, D over here, A over here, and B over here. Okay, this is number one. Okay, then second one I can write D, C, D, A, another carbon, then D over here. This is A. These are atoms. Okay, these are all atoms. This is number two. Example number two. And one more I can have carbon, carbon, and then up and down I can have A over here, B over here, D. And the second carbon I can have D. Here I can have B, and here I can have A. Okay. So here this is number three. Now look at them very very carefully. This first one, number one, there is no, if you look at it very carefully, this carbon has 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3, and this is also a group for it. It has four different groups around it, so it is chiral. This carbon is also having four different groups around it, so it is also chiral. So there is no plane of symmetry. there is no plane of symmetry. Low plane of symmetry means it is dissymmetric. It is dissymmetric. It can be optically active. The same thing applies for this compound also. This carbon is chiral. This carbon is chiral. So this compound is also having no plane of symmetry. It is also having no plane of symmetry. Symmetry. So this compound will also be optically active. But if you look at the third example over here, ABD, ABD over here, ABD. If I draw an imaginary line over here, it is having a symmetry. There is a plane of symmetry. So this compound has a plane of symmetry. So it is going to make this compound optically what? Optically inactive. Optically inactive, which means if plane polarized light is passed through this compound, it will not cause rotation. That is because of internal compensation. That is because of internal compensation. Okay, now have a look at the next slide. One cause of optical activity, important cause over here. For optical activity to occur, they must possess at least one chiral carbon atom. At least one chiral carbon atom. That means a carbon atom having four different groups or atoms around it is called a chiral carbon atom. Look at this. This carbon atom is having Y, X, W, and Z, four different groups. Okay. A carbon atom having four different monovalent atoms or groups is known as chiral carbon or a chiral center. So that is one important cause of optical activity which you must keep in mind. After that, types of optical isomers, dextro and levo forms. Okay. Now amino acids, I have taken examples for you all. Okay. So if you look at the first one, L-alanine, D-alanine. Okay. Okay. L. The name is L-alanine, D-alanine, but this L-alanine is dextrorotatory. COH, CH, NH2, CH3. This CH3 and this COH are on the plane of the carbon, the plane of the paper, and this dotted lines, you can see hydrogen, it's against you, it is going down. This NH2 is facing you. Okay, this is dextro isomer of L-alanine. It is an S enantiomer. Okay, it will rotate the plane of polarized light in the clockwise direction. That's why it is plus. Okay, but if you look at D-alanine, this isomer, COH over here, CH3, NH2. So this one is called levorotatory isomer. If you pass plane polarized light through this compound, it will rotate it in the anti-clockwise direction. That's why we put a minus sign for this. So these are the types of optical isomers. Examples which I have given. You will find plenty of examples in the book with regard to this dextro and levo forms. Okay. So moving to the next slide, racemic mixture, racemization. Now look at this example over here. This compound is butanol, butan-2-ol. We can write this butanol simply like this also. I'm just writing the formula. CH3, CHOH, okay. Then CH2, CH3. This is butanol. So the structure has been written in two different methods over here. Here one method, here is one method. The same structure, okay. Now keeping this carbon as chiral, this carbon is chiral because it has 1, 2, 3, 4 different groups around it, making it optically active. Okay, so this isomer, which is dextro, it is going to rotate the plane of polarized light in the clockwise direction like this. But the other one, that is the second one, butan-2-ol, levo one, it is going to rotate the plane of polarized light in the negative direction, that is levo. So if you mix them equally, if you mix these two isomers equally in equal proportion, 1:1 ratio, that will make up a racemic mixture containing equal amounts of the two enantiomers. Okay, so equal quantities of D minus and L minus enantiomers. Net rotation is DL or plus minus. There is no optical activity after that. So for example, if I mix 100 ml of this compound plus 100 ml of this compound, okay, the dextro form and the levo form, we mix them. After that, the compound will lose its optical isomer property or characteristics. Okay, now the racemic mixture may have different boiling point and melting point from the enantiomers. Okay, now so this was about racemization and racemic mixture in very short and brief. Okay, after that, moving to the next slide, meso compounds. Meso compounds are also optically inactive. This I have explained to that time also. This one is optically active, this one is optically active, but this one is not optically active because of internal compensation. Internal compensation. Okay, because there is a plane of symmetry. There is a plane of symmetry. Okay, I think you're getting it. After this, we move to the next slide over here. The isomerism part is over. Moving further to the next part of this chapter, which is called characterization of organic compounds, analysis, estimation, and identification, and working out the molecular and chemical formula of an organic compound. This is the most important part of organic chemistry in class 11. Okay. Now, whenever you are given an unknown organic compound, then you have to subject that organic compound to various steps. Various steps are employed for the characterization of an unknown organic compound, which are given below. First one is called qualitative analysis. That means to detect the elements. The elements may be carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, halogens, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, or maybe iodine, phosphorus, and so many. Okay, so this is called qualitative analysis. Detection of these elements come under the first step for the characterization of organic compounds. Okay, after the first step, after we have detected the compounds, then now is we have to estimate the elements. What is the quantity, what is the weight of the elements present in the organic compound, which is called quantitative analysis. Okay, by following certain methods. Once we get the amount of the elements, various elements present over there, then we must move further and determine the molecular mass of this all of that organic compound. After that, number 4, we move further to calculate. After getting the molecular mass, knowing the percentage composition of the elements, we can work out the empirical formula and the molecular formula of the compound. Once the empirical formula and the molecular formula is obtained, then we can work out the structure of the compound by various physical and chemical methods, keeping in mind isomerism also. It can show what we call stereoisomerism, it can show geometrical isomerism, it can show optical activity. Okay, so this is characterization of organic compounds, analysis, estimation, which I will teach you next. Okay, now let us see. During this characterization of an organic compound, we need to purify the organic compound to remove any impurity present over there. Okay, now for purification, for this purification part, I request my dear students, uh, some questions are asked here and there from the purification part. But if you look at the old chemistry textbooks which I am having, the purification you will find from page number 676. Page number 676. The methods you can see: crystallization, sublimation, distillation, solvent extraction, chromatography, and for distillation, simple distillation or fractional distillation, or vacuum based distillation, or steam distillation. So I request you to remember the definitions of all these terms from the textbook from page number 676. This is something which you have learned in class 9 also, definitions. I want to revise this on your own by taking the help of the textbook along with the diagram illustrations. Okay, now after this, if you look at the next slide, the first step towards the characterization of an organic compound is, which I have told you, qualitative analysis of organic compounds, detection of carbon and hydrogen. Detection means identification by using the copper oxide test. Now, during the detection of carbon and hydrogen by the copper oxide test, the organic compound containing carbon and hydrogen is mixed with about 3 times its weight of dry copper oxide. This is 3 times. If this is 1 part, this has to be 3 part. Okay, it is mixed properly in a container. The mixture is then placed in a hard glass test tube filled with bent delivery tube. The other end of which is dipping into lime water in another test tube. The mixture is heated strongly and the following reactions take place. So, the organic compound containing carbon, if it is heated to copper oxide, a reduction reaction happens. Okay, copper is formed along with carbon dioxide. Any carbon present in the organic compound becomes carbon dioxide, okay, which is absorbed in lime water. And any hydrogen present in the organic compound reacts with copper oxide to form water vapor and copper. So, water vapor is formed. So, this water vapor is absorbed by a suitable absorbent. The carbon dioxide is dissolved in lime water to prepare a white precipitate of calcium carbonate and water. Okay. If carbon is present, it is oxidized to carbon dioxide, which turns lime water milky. If hydrogen is present, it will be oxidized to water droplets on the cooler walls of the test tube. Now have a look at the diagram on the next slide over here. See, this is the arrangement I am talking about. Copper oxide, it is mixed with the organic compound, 1 part plus 3 part. Okay, that is very important. It is heated strongly in a hard glass test tube. After that, whatever comes out, both water vapor and carbon dioxide are passed over anhydrous copper sulfate. With this will absorb the water vapor, coming out. Okay, and carbon dioxide is absorbed in, it is dissolved in lime water, which turns milky. Okay, so any other gases coming out, they are blocked over here, which contains soda lime. Okay, so if there is any, by chance, any ammonia or any other gases coming out, they are collected over here. So this is how we try to detect the presence of carbon dioxide. Only because the color of anhydrous copper sulfate, if it absorbs water, it will turn blue. So we come to know that what is there is hydrogen. And the lime water, if it turns milky, we come to know that this carbon dioxide is coming out, so carbon is there. So this is how we detect the carbon and hydrogen. Okay, after that, moving further, detection of other elements like nitrogen, sulfur, halogens and phosphorus. Detection of these elements, sodium metal, a small piece of sodium metal is mixed with the organic compound in a very small capillary tube, and it is heated strongly red and hot by using a test tube holder. Okay, and then after it is red and hot, it is plunged in ignition. The ignition tube is plunged into a tube of distilled water, very cold water, and it is broken over there. And after that, the contents are boiled for 5 minutes. Water is evaporated and it is filtered. So whatever you obtain over here, that is called Lasagne's extract. Please remember this. This is how you prepare the Lasagne's extract before the detection of nitrogen, sulfur, halogens and phosphorus. Okay. So I have taught you till here and I have explained you till detection of other elements, nitrogen, sulfur, halogens and phosphorus. Okay. Now it is almost time, so it's better I stop the class, otherwise you'll be late for the other class. Okay, so in my next class I will be doing in detail how we are going to detect the other elements like nitrogen or sulfur or halogens and phosphorus. Okay, so now please hang on over there only because I have to record the attendance digitally. Okay, do not leave the class. Okay, I have collected the attendance, so now you may leave your class. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. This क्या हुआ बोलो? Tell me.